Hey, Virginia. All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Today, we're showing some school spirit. This is a pretty special one that was sent to me. This is the Bath County Beta Club. They talk about appreciation of leadership through COVID, but what I love about this is they are using these masks to raise funds to help out the good work that they do. And we appreciate the Bath County High School Beta Club for being active even when they can't be directly together, trying to do the right thing and trying to keep everybody safe. And to the members of that club, thank you for the letter. Even I sometimes need something to pick me up, and I really appreciate it. All right, I'm hoping, though every time I say that we won't go the whole hour today, we end up going it. I know we went over yesterday. So let's start with our Fast Four. Couple things that we're going to mention. First, today is National Poll Worker Recruitment Day. This is something that the Secretary of State brought to our attention but wasn't able to be here today. We appreciate his work. This is a National Awareness Day established by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission to encourage people to help America by serving as poll workers. There's a need for poll workers as we approach this next election. In a normal year, nearly 15,000 poll workers are needed in Kentucky, and the need's even greater as we battle COVID. And Kentuckians are stepping up. According to our Secretary of State, Michael Adams, we now have more than 3,100 Kentuckians that are signed up to volunteer. So if you're a Kentuckian and want to sign up to be a poll worker, visit the State Board of Elections at elect.ky.gov. If you're healthy, if you are in a place where you can do this safely, and that's what we want, folks that know that they can do this safely. You will be helping democracy at a time when it could otherwise be tested by a pandemic by being a poll worker. Second thing, if we're going to honor our poll workers, let's make sure we vote. If we're asking people to be poll workers in a time of a pandemic, let's make sure that we show up and vote. There are more ways to do it than ever. This ought to be an election that has the biggest turnout we've ever had in Kentucky. Regardless of who you're voting for, I want you to vote. Let's make sure the entire country knows that in Kentucky we show up to do our civic duty. You can request right now an absentee ballot if you're worried about COVID-19 at govoteky.com. Do it early if you're going to vote by absentee ballot, as early as you can. Then there's going to be 3 weeks of early voting, and there's going to be more polling locations open this time around on Election Day itself. Third piece, we go to elect leaders to help lead us into the future. The dollars that help lead us into the future, in large part, are determined by the census. The number of federal congressmen and women that we have is determined by ultimately the census. So much relies on people responding here. And while we are doing better than we've done in many years, we need everybody to complete this. It just takes a couple minutes. Please do it. It helps Kentucky, it helps America. It's the right thing to do. And finally, is just a coming soon. Tomorrow, we're going to have a number of announcements about really exciting projects going on that invest in Eastern Kentucky, that are going to help us make sure that we emerge from this pandemic in a strong way, that we don't limp or walk, we run into our future, and that we bring every part of this Commonwealth with us. Eastern Kentucky has deserved more investment that helps make it more competitive so we can bring the type of jobs that we haven't seen since the decline in the coal economy. Pretty exciting what we're going to have tomorrow. All right, so today we're going to have an update from Dr. Stack, where he sees us right now. We're going to have our update on the COVID numbers, and then we've got an announcement related to UI, to the contract that we've had helping out, to where we are, and how we're going to get through all of these claims. So, Dr. Stack.
Thank you, Governor. Good evening or afternoon, everyone. A few things. On the good news, we'll just run some data real quick. The governor will give the specific numbers here in a few minutes, but the test positivity for the state overall continues to be less than 5%, so he'll tell you shortly it's 4.4% today, which is a good thing. We want to get it much lower than that, but 4.4% is much better than when we were closer to 6%. Hospitals have good capacity and are operating well, and that's good, and there's more activity occurring. As you can see, there's more people out, more people doing things, and more people engaged in the activities they previously enjoyed doing. Obviously, there are restrictions. We're still operating at reduced capacity. We've still recommended, obviously, that schools defer in-person instruction till September 28th. We think these incremental steps are important so we can see the impact of our actions and our choices on the disease burden. Cautionary news, I would observe that Kentucky still hovers at now a new multi-week plateau that is about 150 new cases per day per million people in the state. I use that metric specifically, though I don't have a graph to show you today. I can picture them in my head. At that rate, we're operating really kind of hot, meaning that there's a lot of disease spread widely throughout the state. The concern with that is that the activity is high enough that if we were to have it take off in an unrestrained manner, we go from a very high current point to the next point. So there's a big difference from going from 10 new cases per day per million to 20 cases per day per million versus going in a doubling from 150 to 300. So you got to think about that. Where you start is your base. If you double, it's a much bigger impact. And that still matters. I know that there is sometimes folks who have a difficult time accepting that this does translate into harm and death for a lot of folks. But if you look at the graphs like I've shown before and you see what happens, states like Georgia and Louisiana, I think, Georgia and Florida, I'm sorry, we were paralleling them for our mortality figures, and then they liberalized or opened up their activities much more quickly than we did, and then they took off. And so if we were Georgia or Florida a couple days ago, and we had their death rate per population, we would have 2.5 times more people who had died in Kentucky than we currently have. So that's over 1,300 additional people instead of the less than 1,000 we currently have. So it does have implications. Because the disease is so active, it is absolutely essential, it's absolutely imperative that you wear your masks, that you watch your space and keep social distancing more than 6 feet, and that you wash or sanitize your hands often. Those are your day-to-day regular routine behaviors. Wear a mask, watch your space, and wash your hands. You have to do those things. Those are the tools we have to minimize the spread of disease. Of course, the fourth thing is, if you have symptoms or a high-risk exposure, you should get tested. That's still very, very important. This topic we discussed last week. The governor and I both shared our thoughts. And in my dialogues with the state health officials around the country, I think it's fair to say that there's universal frustration that the way that the guidance was changed last week is harmful, because we have been messaging consistently that close to 40% of people can spread this disease without having symptoms, and if we don't test and look for it, we're not going to find it. So if you have a high-risk exposure or you have symptoms, you have to get tested. And I will just observe there's so many things we could talk about, never enough time. I've been in a lot of discussions this week with schools, that's colleges and universities, but also with KDE and the K through 12 community. We are continuing to work with them. I'm very grateful for their partnership and their dialogue. We have got to find a way to balance at least two things. One is the operation of the normal public health system. So that's K through 12 schools, colleges, universities partnering with their local health departments like they always do. They have good relationships so that they both report to each other information they know to make sure they're both in possession of the information they need to do their jobs, to minimize the spread of disease and keep people safe. That system has to continue, and I know there's a lot of good relationships that will help it to continue. But the other obligation we're trying to balance is how do we get more immediate, actionable information to the public so the public can make informed decisions as to how it apportions its determination for risk. So what do people decide they are willing to accept or not accept for risk? And so somehow we have to find a path with K through 12 and also post-secondary education to get information to the public so they can make decisions. I will say I am very grateful for the dialogues we've had. I think they've been very constructive. And look, let's just all acknowledge this has been hard on everybody, and we're all trying to do the best we can. But I think we're all intending to be accountable to the public that we serve and try to get us all through this as best we can. So enjoy Labor Day weekend, but wash your hands, watch your distance, and wear a mask. This is important because after these other holidays, we've seen explosions of this disease. So what you choose to do this weekend could have impacts for months to come. Please enjoy each other, enjoy the holidays, enjoy the horse races, but also make sure you do it safely and responsibly. Thank you.
All right, today's report is one of the higher Tuesdays that we've had. 807 new positive cases of COVID-19. 150 of those are kids 18 and under, and of those 55 are just 17 and 18 years old. So again, a growing concern, a larger portion. It seems like every week of the total are 18 and under. We think that's two things. Our younger Kentuckians are getting out more, we're doing more, and then they're getting tested more. But the disease, the virus is certainly spreading more in and through our kids. This number brings our total case number after removing 18 duplicates from yesterday's is 49,185 cases since March the 6th. Our positivity rate still under 5%, so that's a good thing. It's 4.4%. We'd like to see that to continue coming down. It says we've got a lot of cases out there, which we want less. We also have a lot of testing out there, which means we're finding more, and that is a good thing. So we can try to prevent the spread, especially from those asymptomatic folks. Tough today that we have 15 new deaths. It's a large number, and we've known that we're going to see these numbers, and we're going to continue to see numbers like this, because even with a 1.9% mortality rate, if you have over 4,000 cases a week, we're losing people we care about. They include a 67-year-old man from Owen County, an 81-year-old man from Lincoln, an 80-year-old female from Pulaski, a 73-year-old man from Lincoln, a 73-year-old man from Fayette, a 55-year-old woman from Grayson. For everybody that says this only takes old people, 55 isn't old, and 67 isn't old anymore. Let's make sure we remember that these are all people that are loved by people that are out there, and trying to dehumanize it or ignore it by saying, oh, it's only certain folks. Oh, these are Kentuckians. These are members of a family. Let's be better than that. 70-year-old man from Harlan, 77-year-old woman from Jefferson, 83-year-old man from Jefferson, 87-year-old man from Campbell, 85-year-old woman from Campbell, 71-year-old woman from Campbell, 88-year-old man from Campbell, 78-year-old woman from Callaway, and a 79-year-old woman from Monroe. 15 families that are going to need our help tonight. So let's keep those green lights on, and let's make sure we ring those bells at 10 a.m. Hopefully that's something that we don't politicize, and we can just show our fellow human being that we care about them. New cases by county: Jefferson 155, Fayette 74, Madison 65, very big number for Madison County today. Warren 39, continues to be about there every day. Hardin 22, Laurel 19, 17 in Davis, Jackson, Oldham, 15 in Franklin, 14 in Scott, 13 in McCracken, 11 in Boone, Greenup, Pulaski, Russell, and 10 in Bullitt and Mercer. A lot of other counties on the list. That'll be up online. Long-term care, a little bit less of an addition than we have had in the past several days. 6 new residents, 13 new staff, 4 new resident deaths. And so, again, a concern. It's a concern everywhere. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort working with these facilities, and misinformation can get out there really easily. We got a call from the federal government saying a certain nursing home, there was worries that they hadn't gotten the assistance. We'd sent a strike team. We'd been on multiple calls. And so just make sure that our fear doesn't create misinformation, especially when there has been a very good working relationship with the individual facilities where there have been outbreaks. Kentucky Child Care Facilities, 2 new facilities with at least 1 positive test. That brings it to 170. 4 new staff, 1 new child there. K through 12 Kentucky schools, 15 new students, 9 new faculty or staff. 10 more schools have at least 1 positive case associated with them. Not all of these schools are back to in-person learning, but we have a breakout on the website that breaks it down by every individual school. So if that's something that you want to look at, make sure that you go online to kycovid19.ky.gov, and you can check by individual school and by school district to get this breakdown the way that you want to see it. Again, on that website, it breaks down information on cases more ways than I think just about any other state to provide you the actual facts that you can look at straight from us. Colleges and universities, this is a tough one. Remember, our reporting on this right now, because it's not the dashboard, lags what's already out there in the public by a couple of days. So 410 new students, 2 new faculty or staff, still in the 29 Kentucky schools. Again, you can go to kycovid19.ky.gov, and you can look at that broken out by the university itself, and it talks about how many of those cases are still active within the universities. I want to just give some positive news. We didn't have an opportunity yesterday to recognize those out there that are masking up Kentucky. It is absolutely necessary where we are right now that we keep wearing these facial coverings. And when I read an article about a group of 100 getting together in a community and multiple legislators without masks sitting next to each other talking, we got to be better than that. We know this works. Dr. Birx says it works. Vice President Pence says it works. They all say we need to do it. There is nothing partisan about asking people to wear a mask when a Republican vice president and a Democratic governor all tell you that it's going to save lives and help us get back to where we need to be. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about basic science. It's about basic facts that say you will be better protected and you'll be able to protect other people. And then it's about how many of us, individually, in our hearts, care for the people around us and are willing to do something that might not be comfortable if it saves other people's lives. And remember, if we're going to get through this, we got to make good decisions. And when every public health official says wearing a mask is the most important thing, if you're unwilling to wear one, you're contributing to what will hold us back, what will make it difficult to do all the things we want to do. Ignoring the problem makes you part of it. So let's be better than that. And here is a little bit better than that. Here is CHI St. Joseph Health. These are some of our great healthcare workers showing off the different types of masks depending on what they do. You got an N95. If you're looking at that, that is the solid light blue. I'm sometimes bad with colors. There's the KN95, which is the white, and then there's the cloth mask, which is the one that is stylized. That gives you an idea of our healthcare workers, those that would be most likely to be exposed to it, wearing the N95, the hardest mask to get, one we need for our healthcare workers. The KN95, not quite as good as the real thing, but does provide extra levels of protection. And then the cloth mask that you and I, non-healthcare workers, can and should wear to protect other people. We call them heroes, and I hope you haven't stopped believing that. They need us to wear masks. It makes them safer when they wear masks. Here's another one. This is going to a doctor's appointment for this 2-year-old. Really important. So folks, I went in and got my physical. I'd put it off. I got a couple things that run in my family. I shouldn't have put it off as long as I did. I went in. It is safe. They have practices in place where you need to go to your checkups. You need to get your immunizations. Make sure you do the other things that it takes to be healthy. We want to get through this, and we want you to be healthy when you do. And this is just the cutest kiddo. Pretty neat. And here's the last one. So we've talked about our kids and the chalk art, which I know I find special, lifting us up. But these are some that not only left chalk art, they left flowers for their neighbor. You know, at this time where we hear lots of positives or negatives, somebody sent me a note. It's one of our state representatives. And they said, psychologists say that for every one nasty thing something says to you, you need to hear 10 positive things. She sent me a note just to say this is one of your positive things. You know what? I think when you leave flowers and this, it may count for at least 5. Remember, people out there are struggling. Let's make sure we do the good things that'll help lift them up. Let's prove during the hardest time that we are the very best people because we're being tested. I, for one, want to pass. I'm not sure I do every day, but I want to pass when we look back and see how we reacted. All right, last major update is our announcement today that we're going to be extending our partnership with EY through the end of the year. EY has been helping us process and adjudicate UI claims since July the 1st. As a reminder, they're one of the big 4 accounting firms and consulting firms and has significant experience in this area. They've helped other states with their problems, and they have the personnel, skill, and experience and resources to help us get the job done. One of the big 4 accounting and consulting firms, they also have the largest presence of any of those 4 in Kentucky, with 250 employees in the Louisville office. In 9 weeks, they've helped us process more than 141,000 claims, and by extending the process through the end of the year, we think we're going to get through about 70,000 disputed claims that are still out there and not fall behind on new claims that are coming. And we focus a lot about what's coming out of the bucket and not realizing that there's so much still coming in. We've got to make sure we get through these claims without creating a new backlog by not having the resources for the several thousand claims that come in every day. Typically, if a claim is in dispute, either the employer has contested the claim or the employee doesn't meet the federal and state qualifications for UI. We got Amy Cubbage here today, Deputy Secretary in the Labor Cabinet, to give more detail. Hopefully she's going to tell you that some of these claims are also waiting on information from other states, which we have to have before we can ultimately process them. So, Amy, good to have you again.
Thank you, Governor. We're happy to announce our continued partnership with EY. The first phase of the contract was for a 4-week term, and when that ended initially successfully with the processing of 61,000, both initial and continuing claims, we chose to extend the contract for another 5 weeks, primarily to help resolve a backlog of continuing claims. This allowed us to continue the in-person events we've been having and keep our staff writing those written determinations we've talked so much about. And we hope to be able to continue to provide in-person services down the road. The original contract amount was about $7.5 million, and then the 5-week renewal was about $4.4 million. This contract over the course of the rest of this calendar year will cost the Commonwealth about $4.9 million, but all 3 of these contracts are being paid through CARES Act dollars and not the general fund. Like the Governor said, going forward, EY will primarily focus on disputed claims that require adjudication. Again, that is the process where if a claim is contested or there is some question as to whether the person qualifies for benefits, that our staff has to gather facts and then write the 2-page letter in order to say either up or down on the claim. Once all processing activities for an individual claim are complete, we have to write that letter. And previously, the U.S. Department of Labor had required our personnel, not contractors, to draft and issue that 2-page letter. You would think it's fairly easy, but it's shockingly time intensive to write that letter. You have to look in 2 different computer systems, review the entire file, then put that letter together. And even when we're at full capacity with no in-person services offered, we can do about 3,500 to 4,000 a week. Realizing that that is not going to get it done, we approached Department of Labor to request permission to use an outside contractor to do some of this work, and we were granted that permission. We are only the 2nd state to turn to outside help. Indiana was the 1st. So since we had Ernst & Young already under contract, we asked them to begin helping with that work. They agreed to do that at no additional cost. That was completely dealt with under the initial contract. We're now hopeful that our OUI staff, with help from EY, can get through the 70,000 claims that are now awaiting adjudication. And these claims, the ones that are left, are truly now our disputed and most difficult claims. Some of those could include former overpayments. They could include an interstate wage issue in which we have to request information from other states or the federal government. All of that, unfortunately, takes time. So while we wish we could rush the process and get this done more quickly, unfortunately, the remaining claims are some of the toughest and are ones that just take a while. Ernst & Young will provide 100 staffers each week over the next 4 weeks to assist in writing determinations, and then 25 staffers each for the rest of the year. We believe this should cut the time to get rid of this pandemic-related backlog by about half. And this will allow our staff in the labor cabinet to keep pace with the new claims that are being filed and make quicker fixes to all of the continuing claims that unfortunately get hung up in our system. Thanks.
We appreciate Amy's leadership that she has brought to this role. And I believe that today's decision is, again, going to help make sure that we can get this last time-intensive step done while at the same time not falling further behind. As a last note, dove season opens September 1st. That is today. It's the traditional day that it's open for those without a place to hunt. The Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife will offer more than 50 fields for public hunting. There are a lot of different rules that go along with it to make sure that we are not overhunting, because as you know, there need to be enough doves for every Nicolas Cage movie. I got one laugh. And I got one shaking their head. So we'll start over here with questions today. We got a packed room today, and just a couple that are written, so we'll try to get through them all.
Going to unemployment, do you know where we're at with the number of outstanding claims that Kentucky still needs to process going back to March? And I know that this contract is coming under scrutiny for maybe not processing them fast enough. Can you kind of defend the companies in regards to that?
The question is two-parter. How many claims do we have left that need adjudication? It's about 70,000, though there are now many more months that fall in that. Our ones for March are getting closer to about 2,000 outstanding. Remember, those could be those that need adjudication. They could also be ones we are waiting for information from other states that we can't process it until it comes in. Basically, what we have to do is like a judicial decision on each one, because it sets up an appeal and it forms the basis for that appeal, and it just takes the time to get through it. Those claims that are ready for that letter to be written weren't close to ready until EY helped us out. They've done things faster even than we had anticipated. There's just a lot of work to be done. It would take us double the time that it's going to take to get through the backlog without them. This is just what we have to do. If we had not starved our system, if we had upgraded a 20-year-old database that we use, if we hadn't let go of 90 plus people and closed all of these different offices that used to help across the state. Maybe we could do it faster, but we are where we are, and we've got to get the help that we need to catch up. My response to the now deleted tweet from the state GOP about teachers' unions promoting anti-American greatness. We're asking our teachers to get ready to go back to in-school classes where they're going to face risk. We're asking them right now to teach an NTI, which takes even more time. They've been out there delivering meals all spring and all summer. Don't attack our teachers. Don't attack our educators. And to try to make them sound like union thugs is, first of all, it's wrong. It's wrong. Unions are made up of hardworking individuals, all of them out there, whether they're truck drivers, whether they're food service workers. These are hardworking Americans. And this doesn't help at a time that we need less divisiveness. I think our teachers are amazing. They are all American, not anti-American.
By extending the contract to the end of the year, are you pledging to resolve all those disputed claims by the end of the year? Are you confident you can do that?
By the end of the year, I'm confident that we will be able to get through the 70,000 claims that are out there that need adjudication. Now, there will be new filings that happen since. And again, when I talked earlier, we're focused on the output, which we need to be. How many people are getting helped or getting some resolution that they can appeal, without looking at the input too, and we got to be able to handle both. I believe that we will be able to. Now, there may be some that, again, we have to wait for information coming from other states, extra complexities, but we believe we can get through the majority of these. Now, there's another thing that happens too, in that sometimes when we are able to get through the adjudication of the initial claim and it's denied, they may qualify for pandemic claims. And so what happens there, and it's a system again that based on the federal government, you got to go through all these hoops, is once they are able to file for that, they may get it. And that would resolve everything in a positive manner. But unfortunately, under federal law, not everybody who applies ultimately qualifies. So there are a lot of these remaining claims that will be initial denial letters coming out. I think people ought to be prepared for that. And I wish we could help everybody out, but the law that's set up is the law.
Status of your RFP to replace the 20-year-old computer system, and when might we see the contract?
I need to check on the status of the RFP. Do you know? Okay, I'm going to let Amy Cubbage come up and answer the status of the RFP to replace the 20-year-old computer system. I do know that we've been able to use some CARES Act funding to make improvements that should speed that process along, but the CARES Act requires us to have a deliverable by the end of the year. There's a lot of strings with the dollars. We've talked about that before in other areas. And so it's limited because we wouldn't have a computer system by the end of the year. We couldn't use CARES Act money to just pay for the whole thing.
The RFP that went out in February, strangely enough, right before the pandemic, was for a complete overhaul of the computer system. It was estimated to cost about $60 million, of course, depending on what we got back. Unfortunately, a lot of the funding for that was tied to the trust fund amount. Now that the trust fund has been depleted, we don't expect to have that full $60 million in our pocket. So we are still proceeding with the RFP, but it is being bid in a piece basis, so that with the money that we have, we think we may have anywhere from 20 to 30 million by the end of the year. We can look and see what bids we get back, and take the money we've got and try to piece it together as best as we can, along with the upgrades that the governor just spoke about that are going to allow us, that will be in place by December 1st or so.
Is that 20 you spoke about, that CARES Act money, or is that budgeted?
No, that is budgeted money that is, once the trust fund got to a certain balance. I believe it was above 650 million or 500. I can't remember off the top of my head. A certain percentage of tax dollars that go into the trust fund get diverted into what was called the SCUF fund. That was for these computer upgrades. That was set up by the General Assembly by statute.
We are also in the unusual situation where only a one-year budget was passed, and so we'll have to pass another one coming up. I know that we will be asking for an expansion of UI, of the size of the office, and of the other needs that are there, because there's still going to be some needs. I hope that we will be able to have a quick rebound from COVID-19 for our economy, but a lot of that will depend on what the federal government decides to do. Joe? So I apparently Senate leadership just held a press conference. It's 30 minutes before, so I'm preparing for this. Are you saying they said I condone?
Yes, they said specifically you condone murders, carjacking, property damage.
You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. Apparently Senate leadership just says because I haven't talked about a carjacking in my press conference, I condone carjacking and violence? Absolutely not. I'm against all forms of violence. I'm standing up here asking people to be kind every day and to look out after one another. Okay. Lawrence?
On the same line, they're also requesting a special session to deal with police reform issues and other issues that have led to some of the unrest in Louisville.
Okay. Well, this apparently there's also a discussion about a potential special session on police reform and other issues. If we have some good pieces of legislation that we can get agreement on, that's something that I'd be willing to work with them and anybody else on. We've had conversations over all criminal justice reform. We've formed a group that includes Senate leadership and members in the House. We've talked with Senator Stivers about his no-knock warrant bill. He's at least talked to us about that, but we haven't seen a draft of anything. Representative Attica Scott has filed one as well, so that if we get something done, that's something that I'd certainly consider, and I'm willing to work with anybody on legislation that's going to help move our world ahead and get us to a better place for everybody. Shelby? Question is about Lexington, where we've seen more shootings, more overall violence, and there's no question that some of it has to come from COVID, different things related to it, everything from the anxiety and the uncertainty to missing some of the structured events and help that we had around us. And this virus it's mean. And what it does to us. We've also seen increases in overdose deaths. Everything that we can do to provide some structure or some help for our youth during this period, we got to dial up even more. Making sure that we're checking in on youth that we know, that we worry may fall into trouble. The more and more that we need to do, and it's harder. Admittedly, it is, because you got to make a lot more effort to pick up the phone, or if you can, get on the computer and talk to somebody than you would in your regular everyday life. I know the community leaders are working hard on it. Let's make sure that we are given voice as not just a community, but as a state too. Chris.
While we're on the subject, Senator Julie Rocky Adams said that she delivered that letter to you yesterday. Did you get the letter?
I got a letter from Julie Rocky Adams yesterday at about 3:30.
Okay, so that was part
this, they talked about what they described as failed leadership by Mayor Greg Beshear, and they asked you to get involved in bringing hope and helping to unite these communities. Two-part question: are you going to become more active in trying to settle some of the issues in Louisville? And do you think Mayor Fisher should resign, and that would begin part of the healing process?
So it's a two-part question about the city of Louisville, and I'll say since the protests began, I've been communicating with city leaders, faith leaders, and others. And my goal has always been to try to help find constructive solutions that more often are going to be proposed somewhere else, but that we can hopefully move forward. We've added training requirements at DOCJT, where we train most of the law enforcement units outside of LMPD and Lexington Police and the state police. Those are about making sure that these communities that are hurting and our police officers know more about each other and can have constructive conversations that can make us all better. I've worked with faith leaders and HCBUs that are out there leading to launch the Kerner Commission 2.0, finding real solutions as we move forward to make sure that it's not every 30 years that we feel like we're doing the same thing each time, that we're actually building that better world. We've provided additional law enforcement when called upon. You've seen KSP in Louisville when needed, and we formed that active working group that includes Senate and House leaders and others working on solutions. So we've been actively working, and we'll continue to actively work. But we also need a little bit of truth here, in that we're not going to be able to fully address this until we get a decision in the Breonna Taylor case. We know that, and we all have to admit that in this. We're all working to create more stability, to create more progress, to create a more equitable world, but it's the elephant in the room if we don't admit that this is the longest investigation of any of these instances I think that we have had in the country, and the longer it goes, the more of this we've seen. It is a critical step to getting that decision, and if it's still further away, at least an explanation is needed. And anybody who wants to address this, and I do, and wants to get to a better place, we have to be honest. And the truth is, one piece that we need, that we cannot get to a better place without, is that decision. The question is, should Mayor Fisher resign? I think Mayor Fisher is working to connect to all of the communities that are out there and hurting. I don't think him resigning helps overall the situation, and you know, my hope is that he can continue dialogue, earn back trust if it's been lost, and to continue to try to move us to a better place. Alex.
I know that at least one district is now asking parents to sign waivers, and a couple of others that are considering it. Can you talk about what you think about that prospect? Basically, they're saying you understand the risk inherent in sending your kid back to school, and you can't hold us live.
So the question is about apparently one school district that to allow a kid back in in-person classes, a parent's got to sign a waiver saying that they waive liability for COVID. I don't see how we make a family sign a waiver to go to a public school, which is theirs to go to by right, not by privilege. I also don't know how we communicate to the family what all the risks of COVID are when we don't know it. But this is a public school, and a public school system that people have the right to attend if they sign up. What's next? That, you know, if we do, I don't think you can make somebody sign a waiver of liability to attend a public school. All right, Joe.
What are your thoughts about the possibility of needing the West National Guard assistance to handle protests either around the Derby or whenever a resolution is announced in the Breonna Taylor case from the Attorney General?
The question is, what do I think is the likelihood of having the Kentucky National Guard, at least in some form, whether it is at the Kentucky Derby, and they are normally at the Kentucky Derby. Normally there's 200 plus National Guard men and women at the Derby. For public safety, a slightly different way. I know that there are communications right now about the overall plan that include KSP and LMPD and the National Guard. We haven't agreed to any specific plan at the moment, but if it helps for public safety at a time when otherwise we could see violence, making sure that protesters and counter-protesters can stay separated and peaceful, it's something that we'll consider. Certainly working through different situations depending on the ultimate outcome that we're still waiting to hear on the Breonna Taylor case, that's something we're considering too. We want to make sure that if the Kentucky National Guard is called, that their mission is appropriate, that the decision-making always stays within the Guard, and they're utilized in an area that fits their skill and experience.
Are you comfortable with contingency plans at universities and colleges in Kentucky should an outbreak arise on campus? And I ask that because we saw at UNC students thought there was a real contingency plan in place. They paid them board, they were on campus for about a week or so, and they were told.
Yeah, the question is about contingency plans for universities that if they have to cancel in-person classes. I need to look at that. I admittedly haven't seen those plans. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but I haven't seen them myself.
Would you prefer that universities not tell their students to move out?
Yeah, I think that there is a debate right now with even in public health about whether you have an outbreak in a university, whether the kids go home or stay. And I just don't think it can be as simple as go or stay, which is what we hear. But everything seems to be oversimplified right now, and there's got to be one side that says this and another that says that. I think it would matter, what the density is, where they're living. I think it would also matter what type of supervision is there. The pro to keeping somebody where they are is that they don't go back to a community and potentially spread it. The con is they're much less likely to go out and do something public and spread it if they're home with mom and dad who is worried about their child that has COVID. So complicated situations like most of it. Tom?
One of the lawsuits filed against you by legislative leaders dealt with the line item vetoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that Judge Wingate, Franklin Circuit Court, dismissed it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the question is about a lawsuit that was filed by legislative leaders, some of the same ones I think that just held their press conference, that we're willing to work with to move this state forward in a positive direction. They had filed a lawsuit at the end of the last session about line item vetoes. Today, the governor's office won that lawsuit in full. It was dismissed by the circuit judge that said that the legislature can't file a bill that is not technically the budget, that contains the same language as the budget, to where they try to make it remove a power of line item veto that the governor has. And what the court basically said is, you even called some of these other bills appropriations, and there can be appropriation bills that aren't in the budget, but at the end of the day, you can't cut corners. You can't find ways to remove the authority of another branch of government. So a little bit in the weeds, but it was a good decision. So the question is on the Kentucky basketball team putting out a video on Black Lives Matter. Admittedly, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I believe that these are young men that have the right to speak their truth and to use their voice to talk about the things in the world that they believe are unjust. These are real individuals, and while we have watched our players for many years, we've got to support at least their right to speak out. And with everything the way it's going right now, it probably took some courage to do that. It took courage by Coach Cal, I know, to embrace that. But we're seeing athletes that have the same First Amendment rights as everybody else get out there, and people try to say you shouldn't be talking because you're an athlete. That's wrong. They're a person. They're an individual. They may be good at a sport, but they deserve to speak out and speak their truth as much as anybody else.
There'll be no crowd, of course, at the Kentucky Derby, but will you be there to present the trophy?
Questions on the Kentucky Derby and whether I'm going to be there to present the trophy. You know, there aren't going to be any Kentucky fans, any Kentuckians there at the Derby this year. It'll be closed to fans. And I think it's important in every instance that I can to make sure that I don't put myself as governor ahead of the people of Kentucky. So if we're asking the people of Kentucky to watch it at home, I'm going to watch it at home too. We're going to do a video presentation for the trophy, but I'm going to try to model what we want to see from other people that are out there, small groups of 10 or less for Labor Day too. We need people to be careful. Remember the 4th of July? Remember Memorial Day? Those led to more cases. Let's make sure we don't do that right now when people want to do high school sports and we want to get our kids back in school. So I'm going to try to set that example. Chris.
Thank you. We're still getting several emails a day from people who say that they filed for unemployment back in March. They've been in the queue ever since, and each time they've tried, they've never been able to reach a human being or get one to call them back. What's going on that shouldn't this have been fixed before now? Is there something in issue with the communications process? And how many filers may still be in what's called the queue?
Well, the question is on UI. You want to take it? Okay. And so as our deputy secretary comes up, I think we now have under 3,000 total claims left from March. Now there are claims that are filed in April or May that may have one day in March, and in our numbers they appear as March claims, even though filed much later. There are also these pandemic claims that you can't file until your initial claim is denied, and then you file it and it's treated as a March claim, even though the first time we could say yes to it might be May when it's done. So a lot of complicated pieces.
As for the full number in the queue, I don't have that information with me. What I can tell you is we have started drilling down on remaining March, April, and May claims. Everyone who had a remaining March claim has been reached out to in the past 2 weeks, and we are now reaching out to the April claimants. So that is happening. This queue that people have talked about was an automated system for callbacks. Sometimes people forget what their date was, things like that, and put that in. But people were put in the queue based on the date of their initial claim. So those callbacks are still happening. We're still looking at ways to make that a more efficient process, but everyone who had a pending March claim that had not been addressed has been reached out to. Now, sometimes people don't understand how the claims work, and we get calls and they tell us, I have a March claim that hasn't been addressed, and we found out that they actually have had a letter of denial and they're in the appeal process, and they just don't understand the process because it's an unfortunately very complex process, and it's a process that is hard for even lawyers to understand. So all we can tell you is we hate that people are waiting. We hate that it's a confusing process, but we're working our way through all the claims.
I just add it's an awful process. It was created even before this to get people to try to abandon claims and to set up so many roadblocks. And one of the reasons we've got so much work right now, and it takes time, is when someone has to initially apply, if they're approved, then put in their information, then request their payments every couple of weeks. There are just so many different times where a problem can arise. Aside from all the resources issues, this system by the federal government and in the past by the state was designed to be hard, and look at we're paying the price now in the middle of a pandemic. All right, Alex.
There are schools that are planning to open before September 28th that don't have plans to accommodate at-risk teachers, and that's obviously an issue going on in the future too after September 28th. What would your advice be to teachers who are basically being told they have to return to the classroom? even if they don't want to?
Ooh, the question is schools that may be opening before September 28th that aren't making accommodation for at-risk teachers. I mean, that's just plain awful. I mean, if you have at-risk teachers, please work with them. Please. You have at-risk youth, too, that ought to be in a different learning environment, digital or otherwise. You have other things that the district needs to get done that those people could do. Let's not put hardworking public servants in harm's way when we know they are at risk. I don't know if those individuals, why would we do that to people? But if it's happening, we're willing to listen to it too. We're willing to do everything we can to work with districts. If we want this to work, right? If we want to get back to in-person learning and classes, we can't be putting people in situations where they might die, because that's going to stop it in that area and statewide, and we lose someone really special to us. It seems that sometimes we don't think this through, wanting to get back as quickly as we can, and realize we're setting ourselves up for failure, for absolute failure. And if we're not flexible in how we are going forward in the middle of a pandemic, you just can't succeed. So we'd be happy to work. I know that KEA or JCTA also have resources that are available. I'd ask them to reach out to somebody. If they're truly scared, let's make sure that we get them a better result. We're trying to make sure that Kentuckians don't walk into harm's way, and we don't want them forced into it either. All right, right at the hour. We appreciate all the hard work people are doing out there. Make sure you mask up. Let's make sure that we are kind to each other. There is a better world ahead of us if we truly work at it in everything we have talked about today. But it requires us to listen. It requires us to be good to each other. It requires us to not have an us versus a them in just about anything we do. As a people in the Commonwealth, we are a we. And so let's make sure, whether it's talking in public, talking to each other on difficult topics, that we don't create two camps and claim one is good, and we just got to make sure that we are truly communicating with each other and not trying to make each other an enemy. So we'll be back at 4 p.m. tomorrow. We're going to get through all this. We're going to get through all of it together. It may take us some time. It may take a lot of effort. There may be struggles, but there is a better world and a better state ahead of us. Thanks.